when you think of the changes that have occurred in our world within the last 150 years, even 100 years, 125, it's pretty remarkable. We have gone from horse-drawn wagons to walking on the moon, from telegraph to visual images being transmitted across wires and now across nothing. We went from letters to typewriters to computers. Technology is a good thing. Technology is valuable, done a great deal of good for mankind. Diseases that previously killed millions of folks are now controlled. Death is not as cheap, or life is not as cheap in death as it once was. Travel time has been shortened. Steve and I are getting ready to go to Ireland Wednesday. And we think, boy, that 8-hour flight from Washington is going to be rough. Think about that. 8 hours over the Atlantic Ocean in a big metal tube that we don't know why it's up there or how it stays up there. But we don't think about that. But we get in and sit down and we expect it to work. And we'll be cruising at 40,000 feet, and we complain when it lands because it bumps a little bit. It is a little wonder that people today have a lot of confidence in stuff, in things, in what we expect to work every day. When we go out and go home, we get in our car, and you get down to the intersection, and you put your foot on the brake, you expect everything to work. The hydraulics to work, to slow down and stop the vehicle. And we never think about it until it doesn't. Unfortunately, with that postmodern world, there's been a lot of movement away from the Lord and away from the wonder of God to what science and technology and we can do. I go back to, every time I think about this or speak on this subject, I think in the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, after he struggles to make, to get fire. He's scraping the sticks and he's doing all this, and finally he gets that spark. And he makes it. And he's got a little flame, and oh my gosh, and he blows and it goes. And then he starts putting all the palm fronds on it and waving them around. And now he's got a big fire. And he's walking around going, I made fire. Fire. I made fire. Well, technically so. But it was around before you. You harnessed it at this moment. To many people, God cannot provide them anything that they cannot get from the world, from technology, from invention, from their own devices. We no longer need faith because now we have science. That seems to be the watchword of the day. Earlier generations prayed for a bountiful harvest, prayed for rain, prayed for sun. And now we just put out more fertilizer and we hybridize seed. And we do all the things that we think are going to take the place of that natural process. It seems that to many, religion belonged to the childhood of humanity, and it's been replaced by something more mature, something better. Last week, we spent some time in the latter part of chapter 1 of 1 Corinthians talking about the fact that we need God in many ways, and that He works in us in ways that we don't understand. Remember, what is that in your hand? What is that in your house? What is that in your eye? What are those things that I'm using that are ordinary and mundane for the glory of God? It's so that you cannot glory in them. It's working through me. And this whole first chapter I thought was a little too unwieldy to try to cover in one time, but I wanted to get that idea of the Lord looking at us and saying, who is wise, who has all these things that we cannot use in and of itself unless we make it work. We're disappointed when it doesn't. To the wisdom that the Lord gives to us. And if you'll turn with me back to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, I'm going to back up a little bit and start reading in verse 18. For the word of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. But us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the cleverness of the clever I will set aside. Where is the wise man? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not come to know God, God was well pleased through the foolishness of the message preached to save those who believe. For indeed, Jews ask for signs and Greeks search for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified. To the Jews a stumbling block, and to the Gentiles foolishness. But to those who are called, both Jew and Greek, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. Because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. The folly of the cross. It seems like sometimes that's the obstacle that we have to cross. Whenever we look at our lives and our lives versus those that came before us, are we better off technologically? Is it easier to turn on a faucet or go draw water from a well? Is it easier to turn up a thermostat or cut wood, even though some of us still do that? Is it easier to turn on lights than to light a lamp? Mama used to, we had a kerosene lamp that we kept when the power went out. And one day I was just burning it arbitrarily because I thought it looked cool. And she said, don't do that unless we need to. Said, I've watched enough of those globes to last me my lifetime. And I thought, what do you mean? It didn't mean anything to me. You had to, because we used them all the time with the old lamp oil that was used, they sooted up. Next day you had to take them apart, clean the soot off of the globes so that you could see better. So I said, don't do that unless we need to. Different perspective on what I thought was casually fun and what she knew to be hard work. So things have changed, there's no doubt about that. But what good is it to have all that we have if what it's produced in us is a lack of society, a lack of what the Lord would have us be if it's used for other things? The myth of the better life is kind of blown up in our faces. Now, you have to, with email or on the computer, it's great, but whatever you do, don't click on that unknown attachment for the virus, for the scams, the way it's utilized. What I'm saying is that no matter what the level of technology, it can always be usurped for a nefarious person. Many people are realizing that something besides knowledge, something besides technology, something besides a new shining thing has to produce meaning in their lives. Materialism and postmodern thought left a bitter taste in a lot of the people's mouths when they realized that those things are not sufficient for contentment. The passage we looked at last week, he asked him, said, not many are wise, and not many are mighty, and not many are noble. That's the base that we work from. And that we need God's power in our midst to overcome who we are. So our wisdom, as he introduces this, is that the folly of the cross. Michael Card has a song, it's called God's Own Fool. And the first time I heard it, I thought, well, that's almost sacrilegious. But that's who we have to be. We have to be God's own fool, because the foolishness that we present and believe and present to the world is often received in not a positive way, not the way that we would have it be for sure. And the Apostle Paul understood the struggle that we face. The word of the cross is absolute foolishness to those who do not believe. If you meet up with someone that has a particular hobby or a calling in life, something that they're really immersed in, and you start talking about whatever this particular thing is, and you realize they're going to tell you a whole lot more than you want to know about a subject that is very specialized or that doesn't interest you, and you wish you had never asked. You go to certain trade shows or craft shows, and there's a show for everything. If you collect railroad memorabilia, if you collect rocks, whatever it is, and you go, and someone's got their display, or if they have particular interest, and you make the mistake of, okay, how about this? Oh, and their eyes light up, and you realize you're in for 10 minutes that you'll never get back, because they're going to tell you things that you weren't interested in. It's foolishness to you, but it's important to them. You see, it's critical to them. We have the truth in our midst, our lives, and it is the way we deliver that is a indication of how important it is to us. We should not necessarily be holding people hostage. We have, I was just down at our commissioners meeting from Wednesday through Saturday in Durham, our annual meeting with the commissioners from all over the state. And we all joked, there was one commissioner, he's no longer a commissioner, he's from Macon County. And Ronnie was about 6'6", about 300 pounds, big old fella, and had a voice that could, just booming. And when he talked to you, he would hold on to you. You'd ask him something, he would hold your arm, and you were captive because he's a big man. You were there until he decided to let go. And we all joked and said, if you talk to Ronnie, don't get close, because you'll be there for a while. We don't have to capture people and hold them to share this gospel. We have to be able to do it in a way that shows we have the importance of it to us, the value of it to us. We realize the true doctrine of God is something that the carnal world may not be drawn to, but that we must share. We must disseminate. We must put out there. The wisdom of the world gives people the opportunity to be pleased with their own accomplishment. I go back to the Tom Hanks, look what I have done. I have created fire. Look what I've done. And the Lord looks at this in the message of the cross proclaims to us in a mighty way that this is not you, it is me. For the word of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to those who are being saved, it is the power of God. The message is the same. It is how it is received. It's different. The wisdom of the world is brought into question by wondering where wisdom exists. How does it manifest itself? How does it show? Wisdom, man in his wisdom did not come to know God by himself. It was only after he was willing to humble himself and be receiving of what the Lord had. We cannot, so many folks, it's like I'm on this search to try to find God through doing things. But we don't realize that all this stuff, all the things that we do is an effort to better ourselves or for us to find a factor or a relationship that we're pleased with when the Lord is revealing himself in a totally different way. God in verse 21. Put on your glasses, Dennis. 22. For indeed Jews ask for signs and Greeks search for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified. To the Jews a stumbling block and to the Gentiles foolishness. They ask for signs and wisdom. Help us to relate this to our world. Help us to integrate this into that which we already know. That very thing is the folly of the cross. It is the foolishness that we talk about. It appears foolish to mankind because there's no enlightenment that we can gain through our own efforts, through consideration or thinking or philosophizing or debating. There has to be at some point an opportunity to gain access to the presence of God on an individual basis through what he has given to us through his Spirit to receive this and to live it. So many people refuse to hear the message of the gospel because they cannot bear the thought of not being in control. And the Lord said, come unto me and I will give you rest. Come unto me and receive me. That means we have to not have it our own selves. We have to abdicate or give that up. Give up that control. We find it difficult to receive things, to accept things that are beyond our powers of comprehension or that we do not agree with based on our preset belief system or that challenges the way that we want to live our lives or the way we want to view the world. I've said before that I think one of the great marks of heresy in our modern world is where folks have the ability to say, I like to think of God as, and then they will have a definition. I, me, man, fallible, weak, the creation, I like to think of God. I like to redefine. I like to make it this way. I like to define it in, the difference between denotation and connotation, right? We're taught that in school. One is how I think it is, how I define it. The other is what Merriam-Webster Dictionary says it is. So we have a lot of folks, and it's easy in this world to say, I like to define God as, I like to think of God, I like to envision him as this, and then they will present their view of who God is. The Lord said, I am who I am. I am not asking for a second opinion. I'm not asking for someone to redefine. I reveal myself to you. The message of the cross is folly, it says here, to the Jew and to the Greek. To those who came, and to the Greek meaning all of the Gentile world. The Greeks searched for wisdom and felt, that they had to be able to grasp this insight and this knowledge. And the Jews felt that they needed a sign from God to how they deserved the merit of God simply because of their existence. They could not accept the gospel, which made them abandon efforts to do this themselves and to have a life of faith and trust in this one who came. Paul points out the gospel is a stumbling block to the Jew. It's an obstacle. And so it remains even today. The world is filled with a view of, I want to redefine it. I want to remake it. And the wisdom of God is above and beyond that which we have. And we try to bring it down to a level we can understand. I was thinking sort of examples on this. When we were in elementary school, we were first learning, we had those Blue Horse tablets that had the paper, the line paper, had the two solid lines and then the little dotted line. You're supposed to make your letters up to, and all like this. And it was one of those things that big. The paper was so coarse it almost had wood chips in it. It was because they knew that these kids were going to be bearing down. So you move from that, and then you got regular paper, like notebook paper, lined notebook paper. And then I remember the first time I saw being sold on the little store that come around in the morning, that they bring around at Crossmore, I think they did. Every morning they bring around, they had two of the 8th graders that would come around with a little tray. It was a store, and you could buy Luden's cough drops, erasers, pencils, paper, things like that. And one time they had college rule paper. Yeah. Now we're talking little lines. And then you thought, that was cool, I'm using college rule paper. Till you realize that when they asked for a two-page report, there was a lot more writing. Well, there was more lines. So you said, I'm going to go back to that big wide stuff. We're fooled by perception. We're fooled by what we think things are. We must realize the world is filled with a view of my mindset is correct. My current one is correct. How do we balance human wisdom and faith? How do we not set aside our minds, but yet live this life of faith? Knowledge is good, and it is right, and it's necessary for the improvements it brings to our life. We've all heard the joke about the difference between wisdom and knowledge. Knowledge is knowing that tomatoes are a fruit, and wisdom is knowing they do not belong in fruit salad. You can have knowledge without wisdom. So that's how we have to understand the Lord has given. We're not to be illiterate barbarians. We're not to be apart from what the wisdom of this world in the sense of how it benefits us and what we need. And we have to have this awareness and live within these worlds. We're living in the world, but not of the world. That's the way we're told. So we have this way to live and realize that human wisdom will help us in our lives, but it will not help us in the deepest needs of our soul. And there's another level of life, another level of awareness that is only filled with that which comes from God. And when we try to mesh those two things together, we get heresy, we get disbelief, we get all the false teachings that have come down through the ages. It is a part of every person to respond to the touch of God directly, intimately, personally, and nothing else. And not have all the other trappings with it. No amount of wisdom, no amount of knowledge, no amount of learning will replace that divine intervention. And that's what he's talking about here. The foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. It says the very least of who I am is greater than the best of who you are. So if that's the ratio that we're working on, let's apply that to our lives and live in a way that would be pleasing to Him. You will meet many people in your life who believe that your faith and your belief are superstitions, or at best you are a poor, misguided soul who just doesn't understand, who are not up with it, and they're not worthy of their time. You are beneath them mentally and philosophically. They're the ones that Paul was writing about who are perishing. The folly of the cross. The message of the cross is foolish to those who are perishing. It is what they need, but they refuse to see that. The cross means nothing because there's not faith involved, there's not belief involved, there's not the awareness of what it means to their life. We're not feel that we are superior to anyone because of what we have. We also need to realize that what we have as a message, as the gospel, as a life, is what is required and needed in their life. Some say you should not proselytize. You should not go out and try to share the gospel. By the same token, if you meet somebody in the desert and you have water and they need your water, you can share your water. And you go, no, I think my water is just for me. I'm not going to share it. I like it. Now, you may need it, but I don't want to disturb you or offend you by offering you my water. I'll just keep my water to myself. What we have is what we have to share. What we have is the gift to give unto the world. We realize that we are saved. We are brought into the family of faith solely by God's grace, and that we would be in the same boat as everyone else who sees no value in the cross, were it not for what the Lord has given to us. So we raise a praise and we offer Him thanksgiving for what He has done, but it also should urge us and push us to share that with the world and to be willing to take the risk of being called foolish and simple and old-fashioned. That we are not up on things. We're not relevant anymore. When I think about the irrelevance of science in the world and how everybody's so caught up in that, I can't help but think when I was at Gardner Webb, my minor was management information systems. It was the early 80s. And took computer programming courses in COBOL and Fortran and RPG, cutting edge. And we had, our programs were written on 96-column punch cards. So you wrote a program and you went to the card punch machine and you typed in a statement. And that was that card. In your next statement, punch the holes. Like the cards you used to get in your light bill. Do not fold, spindle, or mutilate. Remember that? So you had these cards, and you took them to your card reader and had this stack of cards that represented the program, and you set them in there. It read them into the computer. You came back the next day and got your printout. Green bar, paper. Error, line 47. You forgot to put a comma. So what did you do? You went back, you punched that card, and then you ran the whole stack again. And you did this repeatedly.